From Acres USA, you are listening to the Acres USA podcast, a conversational podcast where we'll explore sustainable farming, regenerative practices, and the latest innovations in eco-agriculture with some of your favorite farmers and ranchers. I'm your host, Taylor Henry, the owner and CEO of Acres USA. Welcome to the Acres USA podcast. All right, we are joined with Richard Perkins. Richard, thank you very much for joining the Acres USA podcast. How's everything going over on your side of the world?
Thanks, Taylor. It's a pleasure. And yeah, we're deep in winter, so season planning for next year and taking some rest also. It's one of the benefits of northerly cold climate farming. We get a long winter break to reflect on the season that's been and also to create planning and get everything in line for the busy summer season. It's a bit like I always relate it to my experiences in the tropics here. Like spring and autumn are very short, and it's all go in the summer and then a very long rest period, which suits us and our lifestyle quite well.
Yeah, I can relate to that a lot. I think we live in a similar type of climate. So, Richard, I followed you once I got started into regenerative ag, 5-6 years ago, and you've always, number one, obviously really intelligent, but you've always intertwined the economics with soil health, which I think is an important topic these days. Probably the first time I saw you was part of your chicken tractor design. Did you? And you had do you have a book that outlines the design and build of that?
Yeah, that's right. We've published quite a few books now, and I have one of my books is a manual of how to do all this kind of farming and looking at overall farm planning, how to design landscapes starting from scratch, but then really zeroing in on enterprise design and how do we make these things work economically. And I think that came out of 20 years of educating where people often come into our training who have inherited the family farm, maybe a couple of 100 acres, and they want to get involved in market gardening. And it's like, you don't understand what you're sitting on there. Like land access is so difficult here, and as it is everywhere, I guess. Or vice versa, like someone owning a few acres and wanting to start a micro dairy business. And I realized there's a lot of potential for people coming into this style of farming that don't come from traditional farming backgrounds because they're usually more malleable in their thinking and they maybe come from a small business background, which is super helpful. But they often don't understand the sort of critical mass of the scale these things need to be done at. And so I really made it, I think when I was starting out after my journey through ag school when I was a teenager, the only person farming in this kind of way that created data around finances and time and motion studies was Joel Salatin over at Your Way. And I learned so much from that, but it was already so far out of date. So I decided that when we built this farm up, we were going to, in one way, create the sort of place I wish had existed when I was learning, like a bit of everything so that people can get in touch with what it's like to actually run these enterprises and then really get deep into the planning and all of the things we run as scalable, modular enterprises that you could run essentially on rented land. And a lot of people started getting excited. I mean, we pioneered a lot of these approaches in Scandinavia, and so a lot of people turned to us for how to do these things. So we compiled a book of, I like to call it like an IKEA manual for regenerative farmers. It's like cut and build lists and 3D CAD plans for how to build an eggmobile, how to build a broiler pen, how we built brooders and slaughter facilities, and how to build a staircase that's ergonomic, and all of the things you need to make a farm work well and give people like a sort of blueprint. Because I think a lot of people coming into this space are like testing their boundaries of the skills you need to learn to do these things. So having some kind of plan to follow has been really helpful, and I think a lot of people have appreciated that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we appreciate you putting all the information out there. When you talk about your education, give me a little background on how you ended up here. You went through more of a conventional type of agricultural school, and I think a lot of people in the U.S. look at other areas in the world and assume that you guys are further ahead as far as you don't have certain dyes and certain chemicals allowed in your food already that we're starting to get to. But what sort of challenges do you have in your part of the world when it comes through the education system?
Well, I'd say, like, I've been watching as my kids grow up, the education system is falling apart a little bit here. I feel blessed to have been through really good level of schooling, and I really thrived in school. I was quite academic, and I think it was a kind of a random decision for me to go to ag school. It wasn't what was anticipated for me. My elder brothers are very high flying in more traditional careers, and I guess I was expected to do the same. But I decided pretty young, I think I was 15 when I decided I want to live and farm on the land. And I wanted initially to create a habitat to raise children in. That was my initial intention over those years. And so I chose to go to agriculture school when I was 18, as like after we have sixth form here and A level. So it's like college instead of going to university was the ag school bit. And it was organic crop production and horticulture. I was focused on the plant side of production. And it was very interesting for me. I had some incredible lecturers, but I left there feeling like this information hasn't evolved in decades. It's kind of like post Second World War organic farming. Nothing really had changed. And it was still bare soil, plow based, rotation based in a very conventional way. And then I also, at the same time, was observing the sons and daughters of farmers who were typically on conventional ag courses at the college. And I kind of summarized their experience as studying machine maintenance manuals and chemical application rates. And it struck me that that's not the work of a farmer, that's the work of a technician. These are not they're not necessarily even learning about soil ecology and ecosystem processes. So I left there feeling a bit disgruntled. I worked in organic farms in the UK and worked very, very hard for very low pay in vegetable productions, and decided there must be more to ag than that. So I sort of traveled a lot and looked at interesting, strange agriculture examples around the world, and sort of gleaned a lot from studying ecology in different climate zones. And something I've always said, and it's so true at its heart, is I have many friends that are blessed by speaking 4 or 5 languages, which is quite common in continental Europe. And I had teachers at school that told me, don't learn language, you'll never use it. Do maths, do science. And I believed them. I really trusted my teachers. And turns out I would have been the one that would have used the languages the most, but I never learned other languages. And what I hear from those friends is they're expressing that whenever they learn another language, it really informs and deepens their understanding of their own language. And that's exactly how I relate to understanding climate. I worked a lot in the tropics. I always thought I would buy land in the tropics, and very interested in tropical agroforestry and grazing in the tropics. And studying Mediterranean climates, cold temperate, cool temperate, I found it's all impacted the way I relate to the climate I find myself in here. So it's been very, very valuable. And throughout the last 20 years, I've been educating and also doing a lot more consulting, property design. So I arrived here with a lot of experience, and I knew exactly what I would do. And so this farm built up very quickly, and I decided to use the opportunity to really document everything and really like put that information out there, because it was, it was quite early in YouTube when I started documenting things, and I kept a lot of records, and it's turned into a super valuable resource that people have been able to take as a model and just, adapt it to their time, place, and circumstance. And then we've had this beautiful thing in Scandinavia of these Rico rings, which is this kind of pre-organized farmers market on Facebook, let's say. And it came out of Finland as a government-funded program by a man called Thomas Naumann, and as a way of sort of more circular economy and local food production. And we were already running these drop-off points, a bit like Joe Salatin style direct-to-consumer drop-off points. And we were trying to encourage other producers to join with us, and they wouldn't really, it's a bit too out of their comfort zone. It's a hyper conservative culture here. But then when the Rico thing became a thing, everyone jumped on it because it was an official bannered thing. And so we just swiftly adapted our sales and we set up different Rico rings. And then things really took off because in the early days of this farm, it was mostly foreigners coming here, like a lot of people coming from all over the world, and it still is, but more and more Scandinavians are coming now, and they're just able to take our models. They've got the build plans, they've got the back end spreadsheets, they see it, they feel it, they touch it, and now they've got their sales and marketing platform in these Rico rings, and it's amazing. There's 500 or 600 over Scandinavia. Something like 1 in 5 euros in Finland is spent in Rico rings direct for food, direct to to farmers. It's amazing. So that's really opened up this possibility for people. It's like, here's all the information, here's how you do it, and here's a sales and marketing platform. It's like it could never be easier, essentially.
So
So
describe that sales and marketing platform a little bit. So the government funded it. Who runs it? How do
no,
people get
well,
sales?
the government funded the Thomas Snowman to sort of work on
Teach
creating
it.
a local food system. So he came up with this idea, and essentially, it's like a inward facing Facebook group where you and I, so you produce eggs, I produce beef, we find this guy, he produces cheese, she produces cut flowers, right, let's join together. Okay, we're outside this town. What's a sensible time to have people come and collect food? Everyone finishes work at 5. Okay, so let's make this 5 till 6 p.m. in the summer, and we'll go to this big shopping mall that we see is always half empty at that time in the parking lot, and we'll approach them and say, hey, we want to do this thing, it's good for the community. And it's often very easy to find people that will let you use empty spaces because we've done it in coffee shops where they get the footfall of passing coffee trade. We initially started this in McDonald's car parks many, like a decade ago. It's quite funny. And we choose a place like on the way out of town at the time people finishing work. And then we have a forward facing Facebook group. And so you would, as a customer, join that group for your local town, and you can see say it's on Thursday. So every Friday we put up adverts and we say, right, I'm Ridgedale Farm. I've got pastured eggs. They cost this much. Here's a video link to how we raise them. I've got veg shares. They cost this much. Here's a form to recipes and da da da. And you would say, okay, I want 30 eggs, please. And that constitutes a sales contract. So technically, the sale is not happening at the car park. The sale's already happened. So we collect payment at the car park, but the sale has technically already happened. So there is no red tape of trading laws or anything like that. It's just a pickup point. So it makes it very easy. And I think the key to success with it is that it's happening on Facebook, which maybe that's changing over the years now, but it was like no extra click for someone to get to like people have tried to make platforms that have a better back end for the producer. But one, they charge the farmer for using that, which we can't afford to pay for. And two, it's like another click for the customer, and there's a huge drop off rate when you have to click out of something. So I think the success of it is that people are on Facebook already. And just for example, for listeners to understand the scope of this, like we imposed a 50 kilometer selling radius on our farm. If I was in my native UK where I grew up, I would probably have a 5 kilometer sales radius. Like we are a very long, very underpopulated country here. So 50 kilometers would be local. That's like people would drive that to go to a restaurant here because it's right out in the countryside. So we chose to limit our sales to 50 kilometers because my sort of philosophical approach was like, hey, let's keep this hyper local and I'll teach you how to do it and you go and do it 100 kilometers away, and like let's start feeding our town with lots of farms like this because we need a lot of farms like this to change the system. And so the biggest town in that 50 kilometer radius is about 50 kilometers away, and it's 75,000 people. And that group as of today has 20,000 people who are individuals who have gone on their own and joined that group by their own volition, and you can't pay for marketing that good. That's
Yeah.
a huge. It's huge. And so once a week, you put out your posts, which is typically just cut and pasting. Maybe you add a special deal or whatever. And then people write their comments, what they want. And then you turn up for an hour in summer, half an hour in the winter because it's so cold outside. And you're just effectively dropping off all your products in one go. But they're all pre sold. So you don't have to go stand at a farmer's market, vegetables that are perishing or bread that goes stale. It's like everything's already sold. So very, very effective. I think it's the most effective sales model I've seen anywhere in the planet.
Yeah, I like it a lot. It keeps it simple. You made a comment about, if you're selling your eggs, you link a video showing how you raise your eggs. I think that's an important piece where if, farmers can communicate the value to the end consumer, they're much more willing to pay, a little bit more of a price, go out of their way, not just pick up their groceries in a grocery store, but actually go out of their way to pick up a product outside of that. How important, like when you look at people who have had success with this model, does it usually tie back to them being decent communicators and explaining the value, um, you know, versus someone who might join the same group, have the same access to marketing, and maybe not have success because they don't exactly stick out compared to others?
Well, I think those of us pioneering this, we're really striving for something ideological too. Like we're really trying to do what's best for our livestock, what's best for our soil and ecosystem processes, and we want to make a good living too. But it's an interesting factor because now over the last decade, watching people take our models and, it becomes saturated in those rings at some point. And there's an issue with that where, for example, it's not a regulated system. So I use only organic certified feeds, which are literally double the price of conventional feed. But you could come along and start selling eggs in the same eggmobile, following my same model, but feeding conventionally, and charge nearly the same price as I can when my feed is twice the price. And this is a difficult issue. And I'm actually writing in these groups within Sweden at the moment about this because people don't really talk about it. Like Swedish people are historically like very anti-confrontational, and it's like, it's a bit touchy to like bring these topics up. But I've got really annoyed by it because we had to set the bar for pricing because no one had produced pastured broilers, pastured eggs when we set up here. And so we bought a lot of these models, and with that came the difficulty of like, well, how do we price this? Because we obviously want to get paid, but we also have a value of wanting to keep it affordable, that this is potentially can become the norm, right? Like if we just gouge the highest price we can, it's only a select few that are going to buy it. So we put a lot of emphasis and value on trying to compete with like the food in the marketplace. So for example, our pastured broilers are cheaper than mass-produced organic broilers, which are produced outdoors, but they're basically in a fixed shelter in huge numbers. They have, in theory, access to outdoors, but they live in their own fecal matter, and it's just industry outdoors. There's nothing great about it. And we're able to sell birds that we move every day, twice a day later in their life, and we butcher them on the farm, so they have closed nutrient cycle. We have complete control of the quality on the farm, and we can sell that cheaper than the industry. But then you get someone coming along, we teach them how to do this, how to build pens, how to run their model, and then they feed non-organic, and they'll put their price at like 90% of ours and undercut it. And that creates a difficulty because the thing is, a customer, this is my experience at least, the customers care. We're cultivating customers as well as products. We're cultivating customers that are going to come out of their way and meet us at a car park at 5 o'clock on a Thursday. So these are like the most ideal customers you could have, But they care, is what I'm saying. But they only care so much. It's like we live in increasingly busy lives, and like people only care so much. They don't have the attention span to like go too deep into these things. So this is like a difficulty I perceive happening right now, is that like I just did a calculation coming home from Rico yesterday where if I was to create the same margin as the people selling eggs in our ring who feed conventionally, if I put the same margin on my eggs that are fed organically, there's no way anyone would be able to pay for them. But the bit that I find contentious is they could never charge what they're charging if we hadn't set a bar for doing it properly. So I see
Yeah, you
like people
develop
are,
the market.
yeah, they're skimping on prices, but they're also not moving their birds very often. They're just being a bit lazy, and it's like these are different products, and the difficulty comes when it's very hard to explain those nuances to customers because they don't have that much attention span to it. I've always took it as like the emphasis is on a healthy competition where you therefore just have to market yourself better. That's all you can do. But it is a tricky issue. So it's kind of a 180-degree flip of what you're suggesting, perhaps. It's like some people come in and don't do very well. Maybe they can't sell their story so good, but some people are sort of getting advantages the other direction by piggybacking on the hard work of others, perhaps. So it's a new chapter in these rings that I think is going to be interesting to see how people deal with that. Um, but I think something that's clear to me is like we set up these rings and we also had a much broader product portfolio than most producers. So most people will just have eggs or they'll have dairy, where we've had a bit of everything. And I think those words of Joel Salatin are so true. Like it's so much easier to find like a customer that will like 100 customers that will spend $1,000 than it is to find 1,000 customers that will spend $100. That's totally true in my experience. That sort of echoes in my mind the whole time. And so we did very well with it, but we also took it very seriously. Like we would see people turning up, like dirty farm clothes covered in chicken shit, open a dirty car, and there's like some stacked up eggs that are half dirty. And it's like, hang on, this is like premium food. Like we're washing the vehicle, we're wearing our little logo things, we're like putting up signboards, we're smiling, we're presentable, everything's like how it should be, you know. And I think that's one of the benefits of this system is you can see how other people are selling. So I can see if my customer's gone over there, and because it's all on Facebook, so I can go and say, they're doing this new thing where they present it in this way, and like it drives this kind of healthy competition where everyone's striving to do better, as it were, which I like. I think that's really, really healthy. But it's not a flawless system. It's these new kind of issues that I see. It's hard to see how that will evolve in the future.
Hey everybody, this year's 50th annual Acres USA Eco Egg Conference was one for the record books. And now you can relive many of the inspiring moments. The 2025 Eco Egg recordings are now available for purchase, featuring all keynotes, breakout sessions, and other expert presentations from the nation's leading ecological ag thinkers and practitioners such as Gabe Brown, Joel Salatin, John Kemp, Nasha Winters, Dr. Don Huber, and many more. There's over 30 presentations. Whether you're a farmer, rancher, educator, or egg professional, these recordings put the best of sustainable agriculture at your fingertips, so you can learn at your pace, revisit ideas, and take your operation to the next level. Don't miss out and head to the link in the show notes and get your complete set of the 2025 Eco Egg recordings today. Your soil, your farm, and your future will thank you. Yeah, I think what you just described is a consistent cycle that happens in agriculture, and then we usually turn to some sort of regulation, and then we're not really that thrilled about the type of regulations that happen. And you want this open dialogue with the consumer of agreement, but yeah, it's someone who's maybe more advanced in business and has can study the system and say, well, I just need to do this, but then maybe raise the animals a little bit more conventionally and then undercut everybody. I mean, that's definitely that's a regulations. That's how they get formed, I think. And it's
Yeah,
probably, it's happened in cycles all over the world.
yeah, that's true.
So as you mentioned, you guys have tons of enterprises. Do you use this, this platform marketplace as kind of a sounding board in a sense to, maybe you test out a product initially to see if it takes off and then you can scale it from there? How do you essentially, how do you describe like your scaling of enterprises and then picking the products that are successful and scaling them?
Well, I think that's an interesting, like, wider topic that I've identified patterns in watching, like, students going off and setting up, and I've really seen this pattern emerge where most people start in these kind of operations are quite eager to start up too much at once. And I've been very clear over the years that Ridgedale's not a farm I would start if I was just trying to make a family income and live happily in the countryside. Like, I wanted specifically, like, we had two separate contextual objectives. One was to produce a profitable farm rebuilding soil, but the other was to facilitate and empower a whole new generation of folks to go do the same. And so I specifically set up a mixed farm with a lot more going on than is healthy to manage on your own. Because I wanted people to be able to get exposed to all these things working together in the system. Because when I was learning, I had to go and study agroforestry over here and grazing over here in a different country, and it was impossible to see how to fit all that together. But I've always been a big advocate of mixed farming because the benefits really outweigh the drawbacks. And there's a lot more opportunity to mitigate risk and also cycle nutrients. And it's a lot more thrilling to watch an orchestra of 60 pieces than watching one person with a fiddle, perhaps,
100%.
And
And I would agree with you. When people, when folks get started, each one of these enterprises is a skill to learn and to understand. And, they watch maybe someone like you or like Joel. Me personally, I was watching Joel, and, you try to do 20 of them in the first year when you actually don't even know how to do one of them. And that's how I
yeah.
think a lot of people fail too.
Yes, it's
That's a good
true.
point.
I really have emphasized that over the years on YouTube and social media, and it's reining people back in of, like, start one, maybe two things, and then see how it goes, and then scale it, and then decide if you want that other thing. Like, you can have a much easier life. Like, I could make my family income with just any one of the enterprises we're doing, and that's not what I set out to do here. I set out to, make a little revolution in how people approach this, and that's been a sort of bigger objective, which I think we've done quite well at. But I think it's very helpful to grow with the marketplace, because it's very difficult to base things on traditional means of market research, etc. And something that's obvious to me is what people say and what they do are very different things. So it's very hard to gauge interest until you actually turn up at market with the products. We did that by starting everything at a sensible scale. So for me, an eggmobile, 350 birds is an eggmobile. That's where the regulations sort of shift in Europe. And that's a sensible amount of birds. It's like you could start with 200, but you would work the same time as I do, and you just wouldn't end up with any money left in your pocket. So it's like it's a sensible critical mass to start at, and it's enough eggs to make it worth doing, and then it's very easy to double it. So it's very helpful if you can plan the economy that you can start in modules like that and scale them in a very sensible way. That's great if you have the luxury. If you don't, then definitely it's sensible to go all in on one thing and just really focus in on that. But we did a lot with pre-sales and subscriptions. So that was one of the most uh, successful parts of the farm, is like we were very clear what we were trying to do. So we didn't really sit around with trying to make decisions. We knew exactly what we were doing, so it was very rapid to implement things. But then we pre-sold a lot. So we pre-sold chicken, and I hadn't even moved to Sweden, and we sold 800 chickens. So it's like, okay, well, we can raise 2,000 and we can surely sell the other half over the winter time. And of course, you need to know you can produce what you say you're going to if you're pre-selling. It's a risky thing if you're starting out and you're new to it. Like, I always encourage people that are starting a market garden or whatever. It's like, okay, if you're making 100 shares, pre-sell 40 of them, and then try and find a way to sell the rest of them when you know you've got surplus. But, like, don't stretch yourself that you'll fail. That's, a sensible way to go about it. So we did that across the board. We pre-sold vegetables. We did subscriptions on eggs for 3 months. You can buy one tray a week, two, three, four, whatever you want, but you have to pay for 3 months at a time to cut down the interactions and paperwork, but also just to be able to predict sales over time. And then we pre-sold chickens, and later at different times we had beef and pork and lamb and things. So that created a bit of easier cash flow to manage, but it also allowed us to anticipate and scale accordingly. And so that's the safest way you could manage this kind of risky business, I guess.
So you use the Facebook groups as, the place that you get your traffic, but when you're selling these subscriptions, and are you pulling them off of Facebook and selling them online, or are you doing everything?
No, no. So these sales clubs and subscription clubs, they kind of preceded Rico. We just shifted to Rico when it came because everyone was jumping on it, and we already operated like that. So you would have paid us in advance. We turn up at a car park on Thursday and drop off to you. So when Rico came, we just became administrators for the groups and just made them at the same time and place we already were used to going to. And then we just got exposed to everyone else's customers too. So it was fantastic for us. It's, I should say, the administration is voluntary. So we did a lot of work that is unpaid, but that was fine with us because we're selling our products there and we're doing well. So we're happy
Yeah.
to do that. Nowadays, we're not administering like other people, people cycle through those roles.
Yeah, there's a marketing theory where you can market one to one, or you can market one to many, and finding groups like this, or finding places essentially where your audience is hanging out, is the one to many strategy, and it tends to be a lot more beneficial. In your situation, you created it, so you obviously put a lot of work into it, but folks should always look for those one to many solutions. uh,
Yeah.
where's the audience already hanging out that'd be interested in your product? How is the consumer education where you are? Do you feel like you need to sell yourself or explain to people the differences, or do you feel like the population of consumers there are pretty well educated and understand the value in this type of agriculture?
I'd say it's probably just as niche as anywhere. I mean, you get some propaganda. I remember in the early days there was our neighbours coming over, quite elderly. We're in a sort of rural setting here with a lot of elderly folks immediately around us, and they had heard on the TV that the main agriculture university in Sweden was like slamming organic agriculture, saying that everyone would starve if that was how we produce food. And, they obviously got an agenda funded by Big Ag. And like, I could just see those people like really take that in, and they're like really nervous. And I think it's the same as anywhere. There's, of course, people, and today as podcasts and social media change things, like, of course, more and more people are aware of factory farming conditions or chemical exposure. I think it's same everywhere. It's people's awareness is growing, but it's still a very niche thing. I think it's a small country. I think there's something like 10 million people in the whole of Sweden. So it's a very low population, and it's a little isolated language wise. So it takes time for stuff to filter through. I think that when I moved here, I felt like, this is like 20 years behind the UK. Like I ran a course when I came here. It was a kind of accident I ended up here. I came to help someone out, and it was the only course of its kind, whereas I was used to running 10 of them in the UK every year. So it was very new, and like things like CSA vegetable shares, there was like 5 in the whole country. So it feels like it's a little slow behind mainland Europe and America, perhaps, but I imagine it's the same for all of us. It's definitely a niche thing, but it's growing all the time, which is very hopeful. I mean, I always feel like every year there's never been a better time to get into this. Like it's only going to keep growing as more and more people get exposed to information.
Yeah, I'd say America, it's the same thing. there's pockets that are where it's mainstream and people are really into it, and then there's, we have rural areas that are still, so heavily based in conventional that a CSA might be something new in different areas in the country. Do you find
Yeah.
that being a advantage that you went to a place that was, um, I consider it more like, from marketing talk, you have blue waters and then you have red waters. The red waters are where the sharks have already eaten all the feed and they're kind of the saturated type market. And then you have these opportunities where there's blue waters where all the sharks haven't been yet. But, there's also disadvantages to that because it comes with the education and people understanding kind of how the whole system works. Did you find that being like, do you think you had the same level of success that you would have had if you would have stayed in the UK?
It's hard to know, but something I reflect on a lot is like the UK is maybe like the furthest behind now. When I have students from around Europe, it's like everyone in the UK, or very typically, it feels like a struggle in the UK. I think there's a lot of like uh, social well-being pegged against prices. It's like the egg price can't increase, or there'll be like a national shutdown. All the roads will be closed. Like it'll be mayhem, and
we
like
just we just
price.
went through it. The main conversation on how the economy was doing was because our egg prices were too high because of the bird flu. It
Yeah,
was like on the news every day for a month.
it's same. Yeah, I guess it's the same all over. I mean, price of milk, and these are sort of bars that people measure how well life is going. I guess, but yeah, it's. I guess we got a lot of opportunities being the first ones in, but a large part of it too is we were super pumped and excited and telling people, and like we actually started out by, it was quite some years ago now, so we started by collecting people's emails and having big open days and putting little ads in the local paper, and suddenly 300 families show up and we're crawling around. I'm showing old ladies like the fly cycles in cow manure, and they're sticking their hands in cow pads. They've never done that and they're 80 years old and they're getting excited because I'm like infectious when I'm excited about it. So I think that really helps, and a lot of people do speak English, and that helps because I haven't been speaking Swedish. So it's like a lot of marketing has been in English or Swedish, and it's like a little bit topsy turvy. I think there's people now that can probably tell the story better in the local dialects, but so I think it's a bit of both. Like, there's definitely something to be said for being like the first ones to market, but it comes at a price of you have to stick your neck out, you have to do more work. Like, I can think of many examples where, well, like, we built a slaughter facility, which turned out to be probably the cheapest approved slaughter facility in Europe. But when we were making it, there was nowhere we could go and have a look around and see. We're reading regulations in Swedish that don't make any sense because regulations are often written like that. And we were a German guy, a Portuguese guy in the south, and we were like, let's just build it. And we just did it, and we phoned them up, said, right, we're going to use it now, and it turned out great. And we knew about the critical control points for listeria, salmonella, E. coli, and we obviously knew what we were doing. That they felt confident, but it's like a lot of people wouldn't be willing to take that risk. I guess it's like you have to be willing to take those risks if you're the first one in the marketplace there. But that's the way it is. I mean, we were happy to do that, and I mean, a big part of this journey for me is I was going to have a career in fine art. I always was oil painting and used to love to do that a lot. But I found like that process was very inward and a little dark in a way. Like, you can see it in a lot of artists. Like, you have to be a certain type of person. But I found with farming, it's like all my creative energies or all my creative needs are fulfilled. It's such a livelihood. It's like, I learn more than any university could teach me about a whole plethora of topics, from mathematics and chemistry and biology and veterinary studies and marketing. It's like you have to be competent at many things. And I love that. It's like it keeps me like well fed in that way. So I've always approached it with that sort of creative energy. And I think you need people like that to drive things forward, but then it makes it much easier for people following up. It's like, oh, here's all the paperwork for my slaughter facility. You can just change the name on the farm and submit it, and that saves you 3 months of paperwork. It's like it's necessary, I guess, for people to stick their necks out, and then it makes a sort of vacuum that other people can come in behind, and that's
Yeah,
part
it's
of the process.
the innovators and then the early adopters, and I that's my pitch to people who are highly intelligent, could possibly go to college and have successful 6 7 figure type jobs, but farming is something that touches like true engineering type problem solving brains that it's difficult to have in other areas. um it's a good way of putting it. What made you land in that location? So you obviously you grew up in the UK, but was it because you were able to access land more affordably? It obviously wasn't because the market wasn't there. When you went on that trip to where you are, like what made you actually land in that location?
Well, it was happenstance, really. So I came here for 2 weeks to help someone earn money back from a unscrupulous person that hired us previously, and so I had never intended to stay in Sweden. I was coming in and out to help someone out, and I kind of fell in love with the. It's a very low populated country. It's very safe. It's very peaceful. There's a different sort of energy to the landscape here. It's like a lot of, growing up in England, where a farm like I have here would cost 600,000 to €1 million. I could never afford this. And suddenly I was running a course in a farm like this near Stockholm, and it's like, oh, this is like €80,000. This is like you've got these huge barns, you've got a house, you've got root cellars, you've got, oh, there's another barn. Oh, you've got concrete standings, you've got wells, you've got like everything you could need, and it's nothing. Like in the UK, you can't even buy a garage to park your car in for that money. So it was like, oh, I could actually buy a farm for cash. Like that's kind of funny. And I fell in love, so that was a big part of the story. And then I didn't really care where we were because I didn't know anyone here, and I knew that people would be coming all over to us because, I mean, before I landed at Ridgedale, I had been working extensively for over a dozen years in the field, that I knew people would come to me for training and things like that. So I didn't really care where we were. I wanted to be like, I set out a list with my partner at the time of about 50 goals of how big the land needed to be, and whether we had forestry, and we must have a house that we could move into immediately. Even if it's old, we should be able to just move there and not spend 10 years renovating just to move there. And it should have the ability to be off grid with water, and it should have this and that. And we wrote a list of all these objectives, and we didn't have any money really. So I borrowed the maximum amount I could borrow from an eco bank, which is a small sort of a bank near Stockholm that funds ecological based projects, you could say. It's like an small ethical bank. And then an old student of mine said, "Look, I've got this inheritance that I don't need, so it's not much, but I give it to people to do cool things, and then they pay it back in a way that's like easy for them, and then I just give it to someone else. So I could lend you €40,000 too if you want to buy a farm." And I was like, "Well, funnily enough, I actually do this week." So we had
Everyone needs friends like that,
yes.
especially
So
farmers.
we were exceptionally lucky, and we like it works on a bidding process here. And I was working in and out the country, like I hadn't fully moved here, and every time I would come back in from working in Mexico or Thailand or wherever, and then we would jump in the car, drive for 15 hours, check out this property. I would be designing the property and the landscape and checking the soil and looking at maps and data, and people would come look at the house, and if it was kind of cute, they would just triple the price. And if someone from Stockholm wants a holiday home, they can afford whatever. So we just kept getting outbid by people who obviously didn't care about the farm; they just wanted a holiday home. And this place was really interesting because it had been up for sale for a lot higher price, like out of our budget. But in the property search engines, I always, you can put how big it should be, how big the house is, how much land there is, the price. And I'd always check a little bit higher than our budget just to keep track of, like, what you get for the extra money. I always really careful to say to people, like, look, if you're going out to buy property as a first time property owner, like, don't spend more than 60% of your budget on the land, because it costs a fortune to build a farm. I mean, we spent 120,000 euros in the first few years establishing the farm on a farm that cost 80,000. But this place had gone down in price suddenly, and I'd seen it on maps in the past, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. Like, I was looking for a lumpy, slopey farm where you can do things with gravity and keyline design and these things. So I got curious about it, and we came down here, and it turned out, like, what often happens is the house has got mold or something, and then they just drop the price and someone will smash it down and build a new house. So that's often happens. It's all timber, old houses here. But what had actually happened is they'd parceled off a load of forestry and sold it off. So that brought the price down. And we came down and we immediately put a bid in, because I was going back to work abroad. And if we didn't have a property then, we wouldn't be able to start the next spring. So we're kind of like on our last legs. And someone else started. There was one other person who had been interested, and they had to sell a house to be able to bid. And that was 6 months ago. So we were like, we're going to get this one. And then a few days after putting the bid in, the person had sold their house and they put a higher bid in. And it was already higher than what we actually had. And we were like, and I knew it's a psychological game. So we immediately put a higher bid, even though we knew we didn't have the money. And we wrote a long letter and just explaining, like, what we were doing there, and the vision we had for the place, and that this was going to live on as a productive farm, but also be like an important hub for people to learn how to look after the countryside. And then the story is quite amazing. I don't know if you got time to hear the story fully, but
Yeah, go ahead.
So it got to the end of that week and we'd put in the higher bid. So we phoned up and we were like, look, we really want to close on this. Like, and she said, oh, you'll never guess what? The old man died last night. So there's not going to be any sale for some weeks. Like, obviously the wife is, in mourning, and it's going to be some time. And we're like, like spirits falling again. I was soon to go abroad, and it was like, there's nowhere in our budget. We're scanning the entire country every day, looking at properties in our budget. And then at the end of the next week, she phoned up and she's like, you'll never guess what? The other bidders come in with a higher bid again. And we were like, there's no way we're already over our bid. We can't possibly do this. And then we were sitting around, and my partner at the time had a dream that night that an old man came in to the place that we were staying in, a cottage near Stockholm, and this old man hobbled in with a bad leg and was basically gifting the property to her. And then on the Monday morning, the estate agent rang back and she's like, you'll never guess what? The lady has decided she wants to sell to you at the original price. But you need to come down here today to sign the papers, which is like 4 hours on the icy roads. And we're like, just kidding, all the way from Stockholm. And we got here, and a guy walked around the corner, and he was like, I'm from the Village Association for Fiber Optic Internet, and we're fed up of living out in the countryside with no internet. Today's the last day you could sign up for the internet, because they're coming with a digger by here tomorrow. It's 3,000 euros. Do you want to join? And we're like, yeah. So we signed this 3,000 euro contract before we even knew that we were going to buy the property. And then we met the lady who was obviously been through a lot, but she told us a story that they had this place since they were very young. Like, our neighbors who still live here, they've been friends since they were little children. And they were thrifty homesteaders. They were raising horse-drawn cereal and raising pigs and catching trout from the lakes and rivers. And he had got dementia like 10 years prior, and it was getting too much for her to look after him and the land. And her daughters live right in the south of Sweden, like 8 hours drive away. And they'd been asking her for like 2 years to come down south and have a holiday, have a break. And she finally was like, okay, I'm coming. She drove down to the south of Sweden. And the moment she got there, he had called up and he had fallen off a ladder and broken a leg. And that was the moment she was like, I'm done, we're selling the place. And it was just amazing because in the dream that my partner had had, he had come in with a bad leg, which we didn't know about, and gifted the farm. So it was a very like, I always say, however complex you think it is, it's more complex than that. And it was a magical start to to owning this farm, I guess.
Yeah, the stars truly aligned. Yeah, I work with real estate, help people buy and sell land, and what you just described, maybe not quite as interesting of a story usually happens. With the dream and everything. And usually people don't come back and give you a cheaper offer than what you had made. But in every transaction, when it comes to land, when there's a party that like really really wants it, there's always like two or three different times when everyone thinks it's all falling apart, and it's just staying consistent and keeping your hope alive to finish through it. Like that's one thing with the transactions of land is, as us, like we fall in love with it because we love land, and it is a roller coaster throughout the whole process. But that's one of the most unique stories in acquiring land I've ever heard. So good for you. Stars align. And it worked
They
out.
certainly did. They certainly did.
So how did what's like the first step? So you guys, you come in, you do have pressure, you need to make money on it right away. You've invested money, you've taken outside sources of money that have come in, which I think folks, you always have a little bit of a sense of anxiety to get stuff paid back. At least I always do. Um, like what was the first step? What made it profitable, and then what allowed you to scale?
Well, we didn't take on more debt than we could afford. In maybe that's not even totally true. I mean, for us at the time, that was a large sum of money. Like I wasn't used to having a debt of that size, and but in the great scheme of things, I knew we could afford it. In that, it's not a large amount of money for buying a property that obviously increases in value too. And so we set up the skeleton of the farm in that first 6 month season. We put up all the perimeter fencing, put in all the keyline agroforestry systems. We built up all the start points of all the enterprises except the market garden. We weren't ever intending to have a commercial market garden because I just had left that industry in my late teens, realizing there's much easier ways to make a living through farming than vegetable production. So I vowed never to do that again because I used to work so hard for so little pay in the UK. And we were only ever going to have like a kitchen garden for the farm. And so we started broilers, we started layers, and we had pigs, like heirloom, the native Swedish pig, which is called Linderud. It's more like a boar or like Mangalista a bit. It's like dark red meat, very hardy, very slow growing. And we started with Fjellko cows, which are mountain cows. They're incredibly hardcore little cows that eat half as much as a modern cow, but produce twice the protein and fat in their milk. So very useful dual use cow. And they actually win the best beef awards in Sweden pretty much every year from all the chefs. These old breeds, they're just full of flavor and beautiful yellow fat. And so we started with them and with sheep as well. And as I said, we were selling subscription eggs, and with chicken, we pre sold. And so we just overproduced a little bit and then started getting people's attention, like announcing to people locally that we were having an open day. We did 5 open days, I think, the first year. And so we'll feed people, and we'll have products for sale, and we'll get their email list, and we'll make sure they have a good farm tour and paint the kids' faces, just make it fun to be out and learning something, and like, oh, there's energy happening out in the countryside. And then it just kept growing from there. Like we had sold out all the eggs, we'd sold out all the meat, so we just could scale a little bit more and just took it step by step like that. And
With those days where people would come out, would you actually, you said you'd feed them? Would you give like them samples away for free, or would you charge them?
we've done both. Like in the beginning, we
Because I
did.
could see from a regulation standpoint, like my idea, we haven't done this yet, but my idea would be like, you can buy a ticket to tour the farm. You're not buying a ticket to eat the cooked food that we provide. Just to,
Well, we had a commercial kitchen, so
oh, nice.
um, we it was actually just our house kitchen. So we had this very interesting guy called Per Nielsen who he used to write um, food safety guidelines for the government. And he always would go on holiday to India, and he's like, "Well, how come they have all this raw meat out in 35 degrees and they're not getting sick?" Like, so he'd really ask the correct questions, and then he wrote these guidelines for outdoor kitchens, because you've got this big tourism industry in Sweden in the summer months where people go climbing mountains and walking in the fjords and all that stuff. And it was so much red tape for a tour guide to cook grillkorv, like sausages on the fire up a mountain, because of all the red tape. And he's like, this is nuts. So he wrote these guidelines for outdoor cooking. And then people started asking him for help with. So we actually, when we built the chicken slaughter facility, we looked over to America for models, but none of those meet European regulations. Like a lot of Joel Salatin stuff, all of the structures that we wanted to do here, they would never be allowed in Europe. Like they don't meet standards. And so we found one book about building a slaughter facility in America, and that doesn't meet standards either. So we found this guy, Per Nielsen, up, and we were like, look, we want to build a chicken slaughter facility, and we want to build a commercial kitchen, and we need some advice and input. And he was like, well, look, I'm passing down next week on my way south. If you give me a bed to sleep in and feed me and maybe get a bottle of wine, I'll come and hang out with you and we'll work it out. And he came in and he was like, I was like, so this is our kitchen in our house. It's like probably a 30-year-old normal house kitchen from then. And I was like, so do we need stainless steel? And he's like, no. I'm like, do we need a grease trap? And he's like, no. I was like, well, what do we need to do? And he's like, well, the regulations say the walls should be easy to clean. Are they easy to clean? I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, you should have labeling for food. How do you label food? Like, oh, we cover it and we label and we put these things here and meat goes here. He's like, you need to be able to wash your hands. He's like, okay, so look, during the summer, you come in your back door, and during the daytime, a chef can come in the front door. There's a toilet and bathroom that they can wash their hands, and they come in the kitchen. And you just don't go through your kitchen during work hours. And I was like, yeah, but do we need to change the worktops? He's like, no, don't change anything. Like, everything is fine. It's all just protocols. Like, it doesn't say you have to build anything with stainless steel or anything like this. And then we started talking about the slaughter facility, and I showed him a picture, like a drawing, and he's like, yeah, that sounds good. He's like, they want to have a washing machine. I was like, yeah, but we have a washing machine in the house. Can't we just put everything in a bag, bring it to the house, wash it, put it back in the bag, bring it back down? He's like, yeah, I don't see why not. He's like, they like it if you have a toilet. I'm like, well, we have a compost toilet outside the back door. Can we not just come out, wash down, go to the toilet, wash down, come back in? He's like, yeah, of course. So he was just like, just go for it, just build it. He made it, he sort of gave us permission to just go for it. And when the regulators came, we could just, we knew all those sort of points in the literature that we could just tell them how we do all the processes, and they were fine. So it turned out like so much, like it's such a big relief with those things. Like once you've done it, it's like, oh, that was easy. And I think we have quite a different culture here than you have perhaps in the States. And I guess your vertical integration is a lot more intensive, and also you have maybe like I just remember reading Joel Salatin's work, and it felt like, okay, this is really fun and creative and finding all these ways around the regulations. But that's a bit of a shaky platform to build a business on. It's like, I don't want to be sneaking around people. I want to invite them in and treat them as one of my community and really hear their needs. And, that's a better way to build a business for me. So that's what we did. We like informed ourselves really well. We made ourselves presentable. We like really welcomed. We didn't treat these inspectors suspiciously. We're like, what would you like me to
Yeah.
show you? Do you want to see how I do this? Like, show them that we're competent and we know what we're doing, because that's ultimately what their job is. They want to know that you're competent and not going to poison people and this kind of thing. So I think the sort of feeling socially is a bit different here. Like, it doesn't feel like they're here to like try and trip you up and find a problem. It's like they just want to know that you're doing things properly. And
Yeah,
it's
and that's
even
probably.
funny.
Hey, eco farmers. This is Taylor Henry with Acres USA. I hope you enjoy this podcast as much as I enjoy interviewing these folks. If you're serious about regenerative agriculture, I've got an incredible resource you need to check out: the Acres USA membership. You farm in the physical world, and you deserve a physical printed magazine to match. Since 1971, Acres USA magazine has been the leading voice in ecological agriculture, delivering the best insights from regenerative farmers, agronomists, and researchers to help you farm profitably without toxic chemicals. Our membership included physical and digital copies of the magazine each month of the year, which has always been a standard for Acres USA, but we wanted to over-deliver on content. When I acquired this business, I was happy to find that we had years of audio files from presentations at our annual EcoAg conference. And guess what? They were hiding. Well, not anymore. We developed this membership portal that gives you access to the recordings from farmers like Gabe Brown, Gary Zimmer, Joel Salatin, and Mark Shepard. We also include recordings of private events. Finally, if you are like me and you like listening to content, we are now producing a membership-only podcast of each issue of the magazine, so you can consume each article while you're out in the field. To make things even sweeter, you'll get discounts on books, workshops, and events to keep expanding your knowledge. So are you ready to take your farming to the next level? Join today for a ridiculously low price at eco-farming.com or see details in the notes. That's probably true in most cases. Everyone hears the horror stories, and then it's kind of like what you described. It's like, you're thinking a lot about it, worrying a lot about it, and then you did it, and it's like, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal.
Yeah,
Just kind of have to
yeah.
do it.
And what's really fascinating is like they're actually having to start changing regulations, like for eggmobiles, for example, because when they come and inspect, the inspection is you must take 800 steps. You put these kind of cotton socks on your boots to test for salmonella, because we have zero tolerance for salmonella. Like every batch of broilers, every flock has to be tested multiple times a year to, like, they'll just cull any birds with salmonella. But when they come to inspect the eggmobile, they have to take, by regulation, 800 steps, turn right, do 50 steps, turn right, do 800 steps. But obviously, that's a regulation written for an industrial conventional barn. But they have to do it, and Swedish people love to follow the rules. So when they come and inspect the eggmobile, I just come and bring a cup of tea and I watch, and they have to do. It's kind of funny for me. But obviously, we do some of the tests and we just rub it in the shit, and that's fine. But they've started to change the regulations now because they can see it doesn't apply to what we're doing. And the only reason it's changing is because I turned up and made this thing and then taught 100 other people how to do it. And now there's enough critical mass of people doing it differently that they have to, change the regulation framework, which is it's cool. That's how you can think of regulations as like fixed and draconian, but they can change if there's a critical mass of people sort of pushing up against it. So
Right. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Um, when you got so like you want to talk about like the scale of your farm, like how big is the farm? Like how many, what sort of economic viability do you have? If somebody wanted to replicate what you're doing, like you make a living, you could make your living doing this, right? And you're not on a big farm.
no, so our farm is 12 hectares, which is 13 hectares. which is 32
Like
acres. If
32
I'm
acres, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, and half of that is forestry. And so we've been driving most of the economy on, let's say, about just under 4 hectares, so about 10 acres, in a very short season. So we have our last frost is 7th of June, and the first frost is middle of September. So it's a pretty, you have to pack everything in to make it work in a short season like that. Pricing has gone up a lot since we started out. Um, I've just been updating my book with current figures because prices of some of our products have gone up 12 to 40% in 10 years. And price of raw materials like animal feeds have gone up typically about 12 to 25%. So some of these enterprises are even more profitable than they used to be. Um, but I've got to say, our farm is not at the scale of production it was. We are in a total change of life because we bought another farm and a restaurant. So we're rebuilding our production to that restaurant. So that's a whole nother topic. But we're not at the full scale of production. But we peak around. We always wanted to produce around 5,000 broilers, but 4,500 is comfortable. Like when you scale beyond that, you'd have to start selling further away because there's just not that many people around.
So you're basing that off of your market, not off of your land.
Yes. So peak production here was about 4,500 broilers, 1,200 hens. There's about 10 beef cows moving around. There's been up to 40, 50 sheep. There's been up to 30 pigs, but it's been a bit different every year. Like it's not, it's not always like that. The things that have been making the primary income are market garden and microgreens, the eggs and the broilers. But we've always done turkey, beef, mutton and lamb and pork on the side, as well as berries. We also harvest wild things like mushrooms. You can walk into the forest behind me and pick over 150 pounds of mushrooms that sell for, let's turn it into American, probably $15 a pound. So it's like, what's the point farming today? Let's just go pick mushrooms. It's like you can do that before breakfast, So we do a bit of different things, and that generates enough to pay all the bills and pay 3 full-time salaries, and that's basically 2 people hired for the summer plus 2 people living here full-time. So 2 people full-time living and 2 people that come for the 6-month production season. And nowadays that's to make like a white collar salary. So it's impressive for a short season in the middle of the countryside. Nowadays it's also juxtaposed against the winter. Like 6 months of the season, it's very part-time for one person. So it's a pretty comfortable situation. So winter months have been collecting and sorting eggs, and then going once a week to sell eggs, chicken, beef, pork, lamb, whatever. So we don't carry any vegetables over the winter. You can't overwinter vegetables here. That's the summer only thing. So we're really focused on 6 months on and 6 months kind of off, you could say. And you could scale that to, like, I always wanted to get to I wanted to see how far you can push this with, like, before the system crumbles and falls apart. And we never got to that. But I think on this land base, like, this is obviously very nuanced stuff that people would have to really study my book, the farm, to really take those numbers and know what I'm talking about, because it's, it could look so different in any farm. But I reckon on our land base, which is mostly forestry, as I said, you could probably scale it to 1,600 hens, 10,000 broilers, which, by the way, is considered zero farming in Sweden. Like up to 10,000 birds isn't even considered farming, which is, I don't know who made that regulation, but they obviously haven't stood in front of 10,000 chickens. um, and then it's also worth to say we've been using the neighbours' grazing too for cows and sheep. So we can't, you could never do grazing animals on this scale. Obviously, it doesn't work. Poultry, I don't really particularly even like poultry. I love laying enterprise actually, but I don't particularly eat chicken that often. I chose these enterprises because they're the things you can scale on a small farm and make it work. And in most countries, that will be the pattern language. Like poultry are more profitable than larger animals for time inputted and for size. But you could probably have, yeah, 4 full-time salaries with today's prices off that. But that's like something I did in my book is a comparative analysis of all these different enterprises of like how much land do you need to get 50K out? Like how much do you need to put in? How much land do you need? How much work is that to get the same amount of money out so that people can see like, okay, I've got 20 acres. Here's 3 different farm enterprises that could work here. All the other ones you can forget about because you don't have enough room or whatever. And trying to give people like recipes, even though it's impossible. So a lot of the book is actually contextualizing that so that people can break it down and apply it to their circumstance. Um, so yes, of course you can make this work, but it's hard work. It's always been hard work to make a living farming. It's like there's no magic. We can do it sensibly. We can design efficient systems. We can do the right thing for the land and for animals and create very nutrient dense products. And we can command a good price for doing that. But it's not rocket science. There's modern tools and modern planning that make it much more efficient. But it's still hard work. Like it's not for everyone. And
Yeah, I think
I
that's an
think,
important piece.
yeah, like I see a lot of people coming through here, and this farm's been really important as a springboard for people coming and really testing things out as they go off and invest their money and start up for themselves. And I think it's probably one of the farms on the planet that's led to more people starting small farm businesses than any other. It's been an incredibly effective springboard, but equally, it's been incredibly effective at showing people like, this is not for me. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of people coming into this field have got these lovely image-based ideas of things, and this is one of the drawbacks of social media. Is like you see these lovely cows, you see these beautiful vegetables, you see all the pretty stuff, but it's like that's not what makes a business work. It's like hard graft, discipline, financial planning, staying up late to fix this thing because no one else is gonna. It's like that's all the stuff that makes it work. And I think a lot of people romanticize a lifestyle that's it's not always like that in reality. So, yeah,
Yeah, I always say, there's this vision of all of us frolicking through the flowers with our bare feet and living off the land. But we might do that. Most people do, but there's a lot of hard work that took place to make all of that work. And, some people it's good that they're passionate about this world, and then they can be the people that, buy the food, and understand it a little bit more deeply than most. But it's not
yeah.
made for everyone. That's for sure. We need,
And
we
there's a
need,
lot of
we need people like that.
It's a lot of things that aren't talked about so often too, and I think it's like I can just speak to one of those quickly. Is I came to farming as a 15-year-old. I was sat with my girlfriend at the time, and we were a super close group of 3 couples, one of which is still together now, like all these years later, which is beautiful. But I had this idealistic vision of like I want to buy a farm. I want us all to grow up and live together on this farm, raise our kids together, and they're all like, "Oh yeah, sounds great." But I actually meant it. I was like, "No, this is what I
Yeah.
want to do." And like the reason I'm thinking of this is like I'm at home all the time. Like it's hard to go places when you have livestock and whatever. Like I'm generally around all the time, but I often am not as available to my kids as I'd like to be. And I can see like my friend coming home from work, and it's like they can just shut their brain off. They're home from work and now they're fully present in there. And I think it's like those kind of things that you can't necessarily foresee and visualize if you're looking into this world from the outside. It's like it's not all rosy, like there's times when it's a struggle to turn off your brain. It's like it's 11 o'clock at night and we're thinking about this chicken problem. And it's like, I don't want to think about chickens anymore. you know?
My worst is it'll be like 11 o'clock at night and I'm drawing maps, playing with a map. And yeah, it is. It's difficult to shut your brain off. What's your strategy, or how do you think you're going to try to improve being more available for your kids? Because I have a similar situation. Like our office I'm sitting in right now is where our warehouse is and office, and it's right on our farm. And my kids and wife are 20 steps away in our house. But yeah, I mean, it's so there's sometimes they come out to the office and Dad's busy, and they want to come out and get excited and see you, and you kind of push them away and you feel guilty about that after the fact. But there's the line of Dad has to work to make sure that we have this living, but then you do feel guilty without spending all that time with them. It's almost more difficult because they're right there and you want to hang out with them and play with them, but then there's you obviously have to get work done too.
Yeah, and they also like probably relate to the place in a totally different way. Like for you, this is like, oh, I need to go fix that fence. For them, it's like, I want to roll around in the mud with my dad, like, or whatever it is. And I don't know if there's, it's a constant journey, I guess. It's, there's times when I'm way more available than someone that works a 9 to 5. So it comes in like rhythms and flows. And if I've got someone here over the winter, I could leave for months at a time, but they're obviously in school. We have a school system here where you have to be in school. You can't homeschool in Sweden. So that's a little sad because I would have the possibility to take them traveling, which is something I've always loved. But I don't think I've got it perfect, but it's not awful either. It's like it's a constant management process, and it needs communication and little things of like, okay, if I'm working on this weekend day when you're home, then let's make a special thing over here, and just trading bits of time and trying to like constantly reiterate that you've got to be creative with time use, because I don't work 9 to 5. It's like if the cows escape on Saturday evening, I've got to go deal with it. That's how it is, and so it's communication, I guess, like everything. But one thing I feel moved to say now, because we were talking about the farm scale of production, but we're not running at that production level anymore. And that's because we bought another farm, which is a historic venue and farm and restaurant in our village. And it's an incredibly beautiful place, and it's historically very meaningful here. And I've been involved with it a little bit over the years, and we used to go there also, but it's been abandoned for some years, and it was going to basically end up getting knocked down and developed into housing, and I can't bear the idea of that. So we sort of stretched ourselves to the limit to take it over. And my intention with that is to try and create cultural experiences that have been missing for me living out in the middle of nowhere in a foreign country. So it's like Swedish people are stereotypically, they're like quite insular, and people around here grew up with their friend group and went to school since they were 4 years old, and they've got their life, and it's very hard to get into closed groups like that, and it's not the most expressive of cultures. So I've been like thinking, like, what do I need to like really satisfy needs outside of the farm? And my daughter's turning teenage, that it's like, what would I want if I was a kid growing up here? So we wanted to be able to put on concerts and events and gather people together in a way that's like less focused on the farm and me. So we're on a big journey now with that to sort of dial our production into the restaurant. And that's a process that's going to take a few years to get it where we want it to do. We have a sort of longer term plan, but we're taking our time to not be too stressful with it because it's quite a full time project in itself. Um, so we're in a nice position where we can take a bit of time to like get to where we want it to be. But we are trying to adapt our production now that essentially we could put all of our production into that restaurant, that we wouldn't sell through Rico Rings at all anymore. So it's a transition period, and we're not like, I don't think we would run at that high level of production again because we can add value through turning products into actual dishes, and at the same time benefit a lot of people from a different angle. So something I talked about a lot on social media last year is like, I've spent my entire adult life, you know, talking to people about finances and technical farm design, all this stuff. But I'm talking to already interested people. And I started like, I have friends with some, like world famous chefs who have like 20 million followers. And it's like, hang on, if you were talking about this, you would be reaching television sets in multiple countries, like where's the leverage points here? It's like the industry is like health and fitness and cooking and home cooking shows. They're the people that should be talking about this type of farming. So
Yeah.
that's a bit of the inspiration behind it for me. Was like, I've also had a journey within myself about being like a social media figure and being a bit uncomfortable with that. I'm actually quite introverted, quiet, and got a bit uncomfortable with like, people projecting onto me and that kind of thing. So that's a bit of the journey to why we bought that place, is like to be able to reach a whole different audience and get them to think about food. So the plan is to actually build up aspects of the farm over there too, so that people can eat in the middle of the farm and, hopefully host things, bring amazing chefs, bring amazing musicians, and like put food back in the center of these things a bit.
What do you think? You kind of described it there, but what drives you to do that? Because you figured out the original farm. You probably could have kicked your feet up and ran that operation, over the next 20, 30 years and lived a happy life. But there's something inside of you that wants, you have the urge just to build and innovate constantly.
I think it's my creative process, like I like problem solving, I like creative expressions, and this place is very, very beautiful and has a lot of embodied energy in the place. It's like if you walk into that place, it just feels like people have met there for 150 years, and you can tell weddings happened here and festivities and gatherings. It's got this energy to the place that's like, I want to keep that alive, and I want to meet more of the people that's live here, but you don't really see them out and about so much. And I have this wonderful stimulating life in the summer where people come from literally every corner of the world here, and then in the winter it's like, there's no one here. It's like a big
Yeah.
contrast. And so I'd like to like try and build back more of a thriving like village life in some way.
Yeah, you have, that's a surprising thing. It's not surprising because anybody who has this, you have worldwide reach. People probably look at you as this like influencer, and you're most concerned about making sure your local neighborhood is thriving. And I think
Yeah, but
that's,
it's also like,
I think we innately are attracted to that. Most people are.
but it's also like to, it's been influenced a lot by my kids, like as my daughter's getting
Yeah.
older, it's like, God, we live in the middle of nowhere and all my friends are over there and I need lifts all the time, and like, oh, there's nothing happening. I want to go to the city. And it's like, I don't like cities. I never lived in cities. I never want to live in a city. I pass through them on the way somewhere else. And it's like, yeah, I think they're overrated, but I can understand there's like cultural things happening. But it's like, well, why don't we try and build it out here? Like I wanted to show with the farm that you can make a really good living out in the countryside doing something noble and beneficial to the community. And I guess like extension of that, it's like I want to make it cool to live in the countryside. I want young people
Yeah.
just like all over the world, young people flock to cities, and then rural crafts and knowledge bases die out. And it's like, I want my kids to look around and be like, yeah, we had like famous artists come and play at our place, like who would never normally come out here. And it's like, I want it to rub off on them that, like, oh, it can be cool here. You can do whatever you want here. Like, I'm trying to actually impart entrepreneurialism onto them, but we'll see. There's no pressure for them to follow in that.
Here, I do think that there's a cultural shift where, for a long time, we essentially had a mass exodus from rural areas. And I think it is kind of the cool thing now to move back rural. And there's a lot of people in our generation doing that. Are you feeling the same thing over there, or do you
A
think that?
little, a little bit, but I think it's stronger. Like, that's the benefit of how messed up some things are in the states. I guess it's like you get
Yeah,
a bigger springboard effect. Like, it's very hard for us over here to like really read what's going on over there, but it's like everything's magnified. It's like the highs are higher, the lows are lower. And I guess like a consequence of that is you have a bigger push for people to get out of urban areas. And but I think it's happening everywhere. But I think it happens in waves. I mean, it happened in the 70s here, like in this region of Sweden too. And maybe it's happening again in the last 10 years. But maybe that's how it goes. It's cyclical with
yeah. Like
whatever's going on.
in my region, land prices doubled, or in some areas have tripled in since COVID. And
Yeah.
it really took place in like the 2-3 year period after COVID, because it's kind of stalled the last 2 years.
It's
So yeah,
been
you're probably right.
similar here. I mean, our farm is probably worth 4 or 5 times what we bought it for.
Yeah.
It'd still be relatively cheap
So
for Europe.
when you look at that, like, how do you capture the value in that? Because that is, I mean, it's usually the biggest asset of a farmer is the land appreciation, but then we can't really, unless you're going to sell the farm, you're not going to capture that. So if you did any, were you able to leverage that to buy your next property?
Yeah, to some degree. But the value, I mean, I think a lot of the things I would have put on the land here aren't in that valuation. Like,
Yeah.
that's just the going market price because all land has gone up, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like, they wouldn't value agroforestry plantings or soil building, like, no, nothing to do with that. They, you know, it would be a particular type of person that would want to buy a place like this, I guess. And they might value coming in 10 years ahead of themselves, maybe, but who knows? But, I don't think anyone starting farms like this is doing it to cash out in that sort of way. Like, we've done really well for ourselves, but I feel like the richness of this life is what drives most people. It's
Yeah,
like I
for
eat
sure.
an entire human diet from my backyard, and I don't have to go to the store, and I have clean water and clean air. And it's like, that's surprisingly rare. It's like the water at the farm here is some of the best I've ever had. I think it's my favorite water. Whenever I go traveling, I'm
I
like,
was just
oh,
saying that this morning. We had a discussion in the office, like, this is the best water. You can't get water like this.
yeah. And like, they're not trivial things, I don't think.
No.
Like, it's a quality of life that you can't easily find in many places. And like, we don't ever go out to eat because it's like we have better food than you can find anywhere here, and we like to cook anyway. But I think it's like, you know I don't think anyone gets into this to make silly amounts of money, but of course you can pass it on to kids or sell it if they're not interested. So I don't think any of that works in vain, but I think I would do it as long as I can get by. I would do it. I don't think it's motivated by, growing a
Yeah.
big business. There's much easier ways to grow business. So I don't think that's the
There,
main motivator. So
yeah, there's no question about it. Well, I've really enjoyed the conversation with you. I appreciate it. Quick question. besides your books, what's one book that you read early on that you still return to often?
Ooh, books that I return to. Well, I'm a big sucker for. Um, I think some of the biggest influence on my work has been Yeoman's work, Pierre Yeoman's Challenge of Landscape, and these books really shaped a lot of thought processes for me. And I don't know. I've got a library of 35,000 books, so it's very hard to singulate books in this way. I think the classic one would be A Farming Ladder, George Henderson.
Say that one again.
George Henderson, A Farming Ladder. So he was a pioneering farmer back in the austerity period in the Second World War in the UK, and that book's amazing. I mean, you can find it still nowadays, but it was two brothers that basically wrote a plan of how they were going to buy a farm, and they went around the UK really going out of their way to get apprenticeship positions with key people that they thought they should learn from, like hustling. And then they kept records and they bought a farm and they paid it off in 5 years, just like we did here. And they developed like thriving business with, I think they were the original pastured poultry producers back in like the 30s and 40s. You can see all these old black and white photos of them. And they kept all their records. And it was like the first book detailing like time and motion studies and finances in modern farming. And it was a classic back then. And early in my career, a bunch of people started commenting about me being like a modern version of that. And I wasn't so familiar. So I read that book and I was like, this is such an amazing book. Like everyone should read it. And I was actually in contact with the man that runs his estate. He's died a long time ago. But my next writing project is to rewrite a version of that book from a modern perspective, from my perspective, because there's so many echoing parallels with his journey. But that's one everyone should read, I think, before their teenage years.
That's awesome. All right, Richard, where's the best place for people to stay in touch with you or see a lot of your work? I know you have a lot of different websites, but what?
Yeah, I have. So I'm mainly posting things on Instagram nowadays. I do some YouTube videos, but I don't do that in the way I used to. But I have a link tree that has got links to all of our books, all the trainings we've run, and there's free trainings on there that's like mini courses online that people can do for setting their holistic context and thinking about financial planning for their farm. And so there's all kinds of resources on the link tree. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time and appreciate all your work, and good luck with your new ventures. And anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
No, I enjoyed the chat. Thanks so much for taking us on with you.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to the Acres USA podcast, a podcast production of Acres USA. Find us on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, and other popular podcast platforms. Acres USA is North America's oldest publisher on production-scale organic and regenerative farming. For more than 50 years, our mission has been to help farmers, ranchers, and market gardeners grow food profitably, regeneratively, and with nature in mind. Find our books and other Acres USA media and learn about Acres USA events at acresusa.com. Read our online magazine at members.acresusa.com, and we'd like to thank Acres USA staff for their contributions to producing this podcast. This episode was edited and engineered by Weston Larson of Acres USA. We're grateful to our guests for taking the time to talk with us about their experiences.